The stars looked different from space, had seen them many times from Earth, but up here, floating in the darkness between worlds, they seemed alive. They seemed to breathe. He pressed his hand against the cold window of the shuttle and watched the massive alien ship grow larger and larger before him. The ship was called the Eternal Throne. It was bigger than anything humans had ever built. It was bigger than cities. It was bigger than mountains. The dark metal surface stretched across the blackness of space like a sleeping giant, and somewhere inside that giant sat the most powerful being in the known universe. Queen of the Empire. Was only 29 years old. He was not a soldier. He was not a scientist. He was a cultural diplomat, which meant his job was to understand how different people lived and thought. He had studied ancient Earth cultures his whole life. Now, for the first time, he would meet a culture that was not from Earth at all. "You look nervous," said a calm voice behind him. Turned to see Ambassador walking toward him. She was 52 years old with gray hair and wise eyes. She had spent 30 years talking to difficult people and finding ways to make peace, but even she looked worried today. "I am nervous," admitted. "They have conquered 300 star systems. They have existed for millions of years, and we are going to ask them to be our friends." Smiled a small smile. "We are going to ask them not to destroy us. That is the first step. Friendship can come later." Nodded slowly. He understood. Humanity had only discovered how to travel between stars 50 years ago. They were like children walking into a room full of giants. They were the biggest giants of all. His hand moved to his pocket without thinking. Inside was a small wooden box. Inside the box was something he was not supposed to bring, something personal, something that broke the rules of diplomatic missions. It was a paper crane. His grandmother had made it for him when he was young. She had folded the paper with her old, shaking hands. It took her a long time because her fingers did not work well anymore, but she finished it and gave it to him with a warm smile. "For luck," she had said, "and to remind you that someone loves you." She died 3 years ago, had kept the crane ever since. He did not know why he brought it today. It just felt right to have it close. "We are arriving," said the pilot's voice. "Prepare for boarding." The shuttle moved toward a huge opening in the side of the Eternal Throne. Lights guided them inside, and then they were swallowed by darkness. When the lights came back, they were in a landing area bigger than a sports stadium. Everything was black and silver. Everything was cold and perfect. The shuttle door opened and stepped out with Ambassador and 3 other diplomats. The air was cool and smelled like nothing at all. It was the cleanest air had ever breathed, but it felt empty somehow, like air that had never known flowers or rain or cooking food. Waiting for them were had seen pictures, but pictures were not enough. They were tall and thin with pale blue skin and silver eyes. They wore long robes of dark fabric that seemed to absorb light. Their faces were beautiful but completely still. No smiles, no frowns, nothing at all. The one in front stepped forward. He was taller than the others, with marks on his robe that showed his high rank. "I am Commander," he said. His voice was flat and cold. "You will follow me. The Queen will decide if you are worthy of her time." He turned and walked away without waiting for an answer. The other followed him, and the human team had no choice but to follow too. They walked through long hallways made of black crystal. The walls were smooth and perfect. There were no decorations anywhere. No paintings, no plants, no color at all. Felt like he was walking through a beautiful tomb. His friend Park walked beside him, was the same age as, with a round face and quick eyes. He was supposed to be a technical advisor, but really he was best friend. They had trained together for years. "This place gives me chills," whispered. "It is too quiet, too perfect." "They do not believe in decoration," whispered back. "They think beauty without function is a waste." "That is sad," said. "What is life without beauty?" Did not answer, but he thought the same thing. They finally reached a massive door made of black metal. Commander turned to face them. His silver eyes moved across each human like he was examining insects. "Beyond this door is the throne chamber," he said. "You will show respect. You will not speak unless the Queen allows it. You will not move unless told. Do you understand?" Ambassador nodded calmly. "We understand." Looked at her for a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes. It might have been doubt. It might have been hate. It was hard to tell. "Humans," he said quietly, "so small, so fragile, so full of feelings." He said the last word like it was a disease. "The Queen will see what you truly are, and then she will decide your fate." The doors opened slowly. Beyond them was a chamber so large that could not see the ceiling. Floating lights drifted through the darkness like tiny stars, and at the far end, sitting on a throne of black crystal, was Queen. She was ancient, could feel it even from far away. She had lived for over 400 years. She had watched civilizations rise and fall. She had conquered worlds without ever leaving her throne, and in all that time, according to every report, she had never once smiled. She had never once cried. She had never shown any emotion at all. Her silver eyes found the humans, and felt his heart stop for just a moment. Those eyes were not cruel. They were not kind. They were simply empty, like looking into a mirror that reflected nothing back. Touched the wooden box in his pocket again. The paper crane inside felt warm against his fingers. He did not know why, but he felt that everything was about to change. The walk to the throne felt like it took forever. Counted his steps to keep himself calm. 100 steps, 200 steps. The floating lights drifted around them like silent ghosts. The air grew colder the closer they got to the Queen. Queen did not move as they approached. She sat perfectly still on her throne of black crystal, watching them with those empty silver eyes. Her skin was the palest blue had ever seen, almost white. Her hair was long and silver, falling around her shoulders like water. She wore a crown made of something that looked like frozen light. She was beautiful, she was terrifying. Ambassador stopped at the proper distance and bowed low, and the others did the same. When they stood up again, the Queen was still watching them, still silent, still completely without expression. "You may speak," the Queen said finally. Her voice was soft but somehow filled the entire chamber. It was a voice that expected to be obeyed. Took a deep breath. "Your Majesty, we come representing the United Earth Coalition. We are a young species. We have only traveled among the stars for 50 years, but we have come far in that time. We have built colonies on 12 worlds. We have developed new technologies. We have." "Every species believes itself special," the Queen interrupted. Her voice did not change. It stayed perfectly flat. "You are the 847th civilization to stand before me. All of them thought they were different. All of them thought they deserved to exist." Paused, could see the tension in her shoulders, but her voice stayed steady. "And what happened to them, Your Majesty? Some became part of my empire, some were destroyed, some were left alone to grow or die on their own. It depended on what they offered, what they could give, what made them useful." The Queen tilted her head slightly. "Tell me, Ambassador, what makes humanity useful?" Spoke for a long time after that. She talked about human science and human medicine and human engineering. She talked about how fast humans learned new things. She talked about human determination and human creativity. She listed achievements and inventions and discoveries. The Queen listened without moving. Her face showed nothing. Watched her carefully, trying to see any reaction at all. For a long time there was nothing. Then mentioned human art. She talked about paintings and sculptures and buildings made for beauty. She talked about music that made people cry and stories that made people dream. And saw it. It was tiny, so small that anyone else would have missed it, but had spent his whole life studying people. He noticed things others did not see. The Queen's fingers moved, just a little, just a tiny twitch. It happened when said the word music. It happened again when she said stories. His heart beat faster. There was something there, something hidden deep inside this ancient, emotionless ruler, something that still responded to the idea of beauty. He filed this information away and said nothing. Finished her speech. The queen was silent for a long moment. The floating lights drifted slowly around her throne, casting strange shadows on her pale face. "You speak of feelings," the queen said at last. "You speak of art that makes people cry, stories that make people dream. This is what humans think is valuable." "Yes, Your Majesty," said. "We believe that emotions are what make life worth living." Commander made a sound that might have been a laugh. It was harsh and cold. Emotions are weakness. They cloud judgment. They lead to poor decisions. They removed such weaknesses from ourselves millions of years ago. That is why we rule the stars and you are still crawling between them. The queen raised her hand slightly and fell silent immediately. "The commander is correct," the queen said. "Emotions are inefficient. They serve no logical purpose, but I find myself curious." She looked at with those silver eyes. "You truly believe that feeling things makes you stronger?" "I believe it makes us alive," replied. The queen said nothing. She simply stared at the humans for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then she waved her hand. "You will stay on this ship while I consider your fate. Commander will show you to your quarters. We will speak again tomorrow." The audience was over, and the others bowed and followed out of the throne chamber. The massive doors closed behind them with a sound like thunder. Let out a long breath. That was intense. I felt like she was looking into my soul. "She probably was," said quietly. "They have technology we cannot imagine. Who knows what she can see?" They were led to a section of the ship prepared for them. The rooms were simple but comfortable. Everything was still black and silver, still cold and perfect, but at least there were beds and food. Was about to enter his room when a soft voice stopped him. "Human." He turned to see a young standing in the shadows. She was smaller than the others, with curious eyes that seemed different somehow. Less empty, more alive. "I am," she said. "I'm a scholar. I study other species." She paused, looking nervous. "May I speak with you?" Looked around. The hallway was empty, of course. Stepped closer. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I have studied humans for many years. Your species fascinates me. You do things that make no logical sense." "Like what?" "Like gifts." Silver eyes were wide with wonder. "You give things to each other without expecting anything in return. You spend time and effort creating objects just to make someone else happy. This concept does not exist in culture. Everything we do is a transaction, a trade. There must always be equal value exchanged." "Thought about this, so you never give presents, not even to family?" "We do not have family the way you do," said. "We are born in facilities. We are raised by the state. Personal connections are discouraged because they lead to emotional weakness." She paused. "But I have read about human families, about parents who sacrifice everything for their children, about friends who die for each other, about lovers who give their whole hearts without asking for anything back." Her voice became very soft. "I do not understand it, but I want to." Felt something warm in his chest. This young alien, raised in a world without love, was trying to understand the most human thing of all. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. Looked down, "Because I think the queen is curious too. She has lived for 400 years. She has conquered everything there is to conquer, but she has never felt anything. She has never received anything that was given freely." Looked up at with intensity. "Maybe that is what she is missing. Maybe that is what all are missing." Touched the wooden box in his pocket. The paper crane seemed to pulse with warmth. An idea was forming in his mind. A crazy, impossible idea. "Thank you," he said. "You have given me much to think about." Nodded and disappeared into the shadows, as quietly as she had appeared. Stood alone in the cold hallway, thinking about an ancient queen who had never received a gift. Maybe it was time to change that. The next morning woke up early. He had not slept well. His mind kept turning over the same thoughts again and again. The queen, the paper crane's words about gifts. He sat on the edge of his bed and opened the wooden box. The paper crane sat inside, small and delicate. The paper was old now, slightly yellow with age. One of the wings was a little crooked because his grandmother's hands had been shaking when she folded it. It was not perfect. That was what made it precious. Remembered the day she gave it to him. He was 12 years old and scared about starting a new school. His grandmother sat with him in her tiny kitchen and folded the paper slowly, carefully. Her fingers were bent with age and pain, but she did not stop until it was finished. She had said, pressing the crane into his small hands, "When you feel alone, look at this crane. Remember that someone used their time and their love to make it. Remember that you are never really alone." He carried it with him ever since, through school, through university, through his training to become a diplomat. It was always there in his pocket or his bag, a small reminder that love existed in the world. Now he was thinking about giving it away. The thought made his chest hurt. This was the last thing his grandmother ever gave him. How could he part with it? What if he regretted it forever? But then he thought about Queen, 400 years old, never smiled, never cried, never received a single gift in her entire long life. What kind of existence was that? What kind of loneliness? A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. He put the crane back in the box and opened the door. It was looking worried. The negotiations are not going well. Ambassador has been meeting with officials all morning. They want things we cannot give, technology we do not have, resources we cannot spare. Followed to the meeting room where was sitting with her head in her hands. She looked exhausted. "They want too much," she said when she saw. "They see us as weak. They think they can take whatever they want from us." She shook her head. "Commander is pushing hard for conquest. He keeps telling the Queen that humans are not worth the trouble of alliance. He says we should be conquered and used as workers." Felt cold anger in his stomach. And what does the Queen say? Nothing. She just watches and listens. She has not made a decision yet. Looked at him with tired eyes. "I do not know what else we can offer. We have given them everything we have." Sat down slowly. "Maybe we are offering the wrong things." "What do you mean?" He told them about his conversation about how they did not understand gifts, about how everything in their world was a transaction. Listened carefully, her face thoughtful. "That is interesting," she said, "but how does it help us?" "I am not sure yet," admitted. "But I think the answer is not in what we can trade. It is in what we can give freely." Later that day, found in the ship's library. It was a vast room filled with floating screens that contained all the knowledge of the Empire. Billions of years of history, science, and conquest. Was studying a screen about Earth. She looked up when approached and quickly turned it off. "I was just researching," she said, looking embarrassed. "It is fine," said with a small smile. "I am glad you find us interesting." They walked together through the quiet library. The floating screens cast soft blue light on their faces. "Tell me more about culture," said. "Why do your people not have emotions?" Was quiet for a moment. "Millions of years ago we were not so different from you. We loved and hated and feared and hoped. But our scientists decided that emotions made us weak. They made us fight each other. They made us make bad decisions." She stopped walking and looked at a screen showing ancient history. The images showed a beautiful world with colorful buildings and who smiled and laughed. "So they changed us," continued. "They modified our genes. They removed the parts of our brains that created strong emotions. Over many generations we became what we are now, cold, logical, efficient." She paused, conquering. Stared at the old images. And no one ever questioned this. No one ever wanted to go back. Go back to what? Pain, heartbreak, loss, shook her head. We were taught that emotions are weakness, that the old were foolish, that we are better now. Are you? Did not answer for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I do not know. Sometimes I feel something, small things like curiosity or wonder. When I study humans and see how you live, how you love, how you create beautiful things just because you can, I feel something I cannot name. She looked at with silver eyes that held a strange kind of sadness. The modifications did not remove everything, not completely. The emotions are still there, somewhere deep inside us, but we have forgotten how to reach them. We have forgotten how to feel. Thought about this. What about the Queen? Does she feel things too? Lowered her voice even more. There are stories, old stories that few believe. They say that before the Queen took the throne, she was different, that she laughed and smiled and sang songs. But when she became Queen, she had to be modified more than anyone else. A ruler cannot afford weakness. But the emotions are still inside her. Maybe, no one knows for sure. She has been cold for so long that everyone has forgotten she was ever warm. Made his decision in that moment. He knew what he had to do. It was crazy. It was dangerous. It might not work at all, but he had to try. I need your help. She looked at him with surprise. With what? I want to request a private meeting with the Queen, just me and her. No advisors, no guards. His eyes went wide. That is not possible. Commander would never allow it. The Queen does not meet privately with anyone. But she might agree, said. She is curious about humans. You said so yourself. If I ask for something no one has ever asked for, she might be curious enough to say yes. Stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. I can try, but if this fails, Commander will use it as proof that humans are foolish. He will push harder for conquest. I know, said, but I have to try. That night, he held the paper crane in his hands and thought about his grandmother. He thought about love and gifts and what it meant to give something precious without expecting anything back. Tomorrow, he would find out if a simple paper crane could change the fate of humanity. The message came the next morning. The Queen had agreed to meet with a loan. Ambassador was furious when she heard. She paced back and forth in the meeting room, her face tight with worry. This is madness, she said. You are not trained for this. One wrong word and you could doom us all. What were you thinking? Stood calmly, the wooden box heavy in his pocket. I was thinking that our normal approach is not working. We have offered technology, resources, trade agreements. None of it has impressed the Queen. Maybe we need to offer something different. And what exactly are you going to offer? Did not answer. He knew that if he told his plan, she would stop him. She would think he was crazy. Maybe he was crazy, but he could not shake the feeling that this was right. Walked with him to the doors of the Queen's private chamber. His friend's face was pale with worry. Are you sure about this? Asked. No, admitted, but I am going to do it anyway. That is either very brave or very stupid. Smiled slightly, probably both. The doors opened and walked inside alone. The Queen's private chamber was smaller than the throne room but somehow more intimidating. The walls were made of something that looked like frozen starlight. In the center of the room, Queen sat on a simple chair, watching him with those ancient silver eyes. She was alone. No guards, no advisors, just the two of them in this strange, cold room. You have 5 minutes, the Queen said. Her voice was flat without warmth or anger. Speak. Did not move closer. He stood where he was and took a deep breath. Your Majesty, I am not going to argue for humanity's worth. I am not going to list our achievements or beg for mercy. I think you have heard enough of that from Ambassador. The Queen tilted her head slightly, a tiny movement, but for her it was almost expressive. Then why are you here? To tell you a story. Silence. The Queen did not tell him to stop, so he continued. I had a grandmother. Her name was, She was not an important person. She never traveled to other planets. She never led armies or ruled nations. She lived her whole life in a small village on Earth. Paused, remembering. His grandmother's face was clear in his mind, her wrinkled skin, her warm smile, her gentle hands. She survived many hard things, wars, poverty, losing her husband when she was young. She raised my mother alone, working every day until her hands bled. Life was never easy for her, but she never complained. She never became bitter. She kept going day after day because she loved her family. The Queen watched him without expression, but she did not stop him. When I was young, I was often scared of school, scared of the future, scared of everything. My grandmother would sit with me and fold paper. She made birds and flowers and little animals. Her fingers were old and stiff and it was hard for her, but she did it anyway just to make me smile. Reached into his pocket and pulled out the wooden box. He opened it carefully and took out the paper crane. She made this for me when I was 12. It took her 2 hours because her hands were shaking from age. When she finished, she put it in my hands and told me something I will never forget. He looked at the Queen directly. She said, "When you feel alone, look at this crane. Remember that someone used their time and their love to make it. Remember that you are never really alone." The Queen's eyes moved to the paper crane. For just a moment, something flickered in those silver depths, something old and forgotten. "She died 3 years ago," continued, his voice steady. "This crane is the last thing she ever gave me. It is the most precious thing I own, not because it is valuable. It is just paper. It cannot buy anything. It has no power. Any child could make one." He stepped forward slowly, holding out the crane. "But this crane represents something that cannot be bought or traded or conquered. It represents love given freely. Time spent just to make another person happy. A gift without expectation." The Queen's eyes remained fixed on the crane. Her hands, resting on her lap, twitched slightly. "Your Majesty, I have studied I know that you do not give gifts. Everything in your culture is a transaction, an exchange of equal value," held the crane higher. "But this is not a transaction. I do not want anything from you. I am not asking for alliance or mercy or anything at all." His voice became soft but clear. "I just want to give you this, because it is precious to me, because I think you have never received anything like it, because I believe that somewhere, deep inside you, there is still a part that remembers what it feels like to be given something out of pure love." The room was completely silent. The Queen stared at the paper crane like it was something dangerous, like it was something that could hurt her. "This is foolish," she said finally. Her voice was the same as before, flat, cold, but her hands were trembling slightly now. "Why would you give away something precious for nothing? It makes no logical sense." "That is exactly why I am doing it," said. "Because humans do not live by logic alone. We live by love, by connection, by the belief that making someone else happy is worth more than anything we could receive in return." He placed the paper crane on the small table between them. The delicate paper shape sat there, fragile and beautiful and completely out of place in this cold, perfect room. "My grandmother spent her last years in pain," said quietly. "Her body was failing. Every day was difficult, but she still found the strength to fold this crane for me. She did not have to. She could have rested. She could have saved her energy. But she wanted me to have something to remember her by, something made with love." He looked at the Queen with all the sincerity in his heart. "That is what humans are. We are not strong like we do not live for centuries. We cannot conquer star systems, but we can love. We can give without expecting anything back. We can find meaning in small, simple things." The Queen reached out slowly. Her pale blue hand hovered over the paper crane, trembling. "If you take this," said, "you will own a piece of my grandmother's love." She never knew that one day her crane would end up in the hands of an alien queen, but I think she would be happy. She believed that love should be shared, not hoarded. The queen's fingers touched the paper crane. She picked it up as carefully as if it were made of glass. She held it in her palm and stared at it with those ancient silver eyes. And something changed. It was small, so small that anyone else might have missed it, but saw it clearly. A single tear rolled down the queen's pale blue cheek. The queen did not move. She sat frozen in her chair, the paper crane cradled in her palm, that single tear sliding down her cheek like a drop of liquid silver. Her free hand rose slowly to her face. She touched the wetness with trembling fingers, then stared at her wet fingertips with complete confusion. It was like she did not understand what was happening to her. "What is this?" she whispered. Her voice was different now, not flat, not cold. It was cracked and uncertain, like a voice that had not been truly used in hundreds of years. "What is this water on my face?" Stood very still, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever was happening. "It is a tear, Your Majesty. You are crying." "That is not possible." The queen shook her head slowly. "The cannot cry. That ability was removed from us millions of years ago. We are biologically incapable of tears." But even as she spoke, another tear fell from her other eye, and then another. The tears came faster now, streaming down her pale cheeks like rain. The queen made a sound that was half gasp and half sob. Her whole body began to shake. She clutched the paper crane to her chest with both hands, curling around it like it was the most precious thing in the universe. "What have you done to me?" she asked, and her voice broke completely. "What is this feeling? I do not understand. I cannot understand." Stepped closer slowly, carefully. "It is grief, Your Majesty, and love, and memory. You are feeling things that have been locked inside you for a very long time." "I cannot," the queen gasped for air. "I cannot breathe, my chest hurts. Is this dying? Am I dying?" "No, you are not dying. You are just feeling. It is overwhelming at first, but it will not harm you." The queen looked up at him with silver eyes swimming in tears. For the first time, she did not look like an ancient ruler who had conquered 300 star systems. She looked lost. She looked young. She looked frighteningly human. "I remember," she said suddenly. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I remember being small, before the modifications, before the throne. I had a mother. She used to sing to me when I was scared." The tears fell faster. Her whole body shook with the force of emotions that had been buried for 4 centuries. "They took that away from me," the queen continued, her voice rising with something that might have been anger or might have been sorrow. "When I became queen, they said I needed to be stronger. They said emotions were weakness. They modified me more than anyone else. They cut away everything that made me feel." She looked down at the paper crane in her hands, but it was still there, somewhere deep inside, waiting, locked away so long I forgot it existed. She raised her eyes to. Tears still streamed down her face, but something else was there now, something like wonder. "This small paper bird," she said, "made by an old woman's shaking hands. It reached the place inside me that no weapon or technology or conquest ever touched. How is that possible?" Knelt before her, not because protocol demanded it, but because it felt right. Because love does not follow rules, Your Majesty. It cannot be blocked by walls or guards or genetic modifications. It finds a way. It always finds a way. The queen stared at him for a long moment. Then she did something that had not happened in 400 years. She smiled. It was small and uncertain, like the smile of someone who had forgotten how to use those muscles. But it was real. It transformed her face from cold perfection into something alive and beautiful. "Your grandmother," the queen said. "She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She was," said, and felt his own eyes grow wet. "She was the best person I ever knew." The queen carefully unfolded herself from her chair. She stood slowly, still holding the paper crane like a treasure. She walked to the window of her chamber and looked out at the stars. "I have conquered worlds," she said softly. "I have lived for centuries. I have commanded armies and crushed civilizations. I was told this made me powerful. I was told this made me great. She turned back to. Her face was wet with tears, but her eyes were clearer than before, more alive. But I have never felt this warmth inside my chest, this connection to another being, this sense that I am not alone in the universe. She looked at the crane. All of that from a simple paper bird and the memory of an old woman's love. The walls of the room began to vibrate. A low hum filled the air. Looked around in alarm, but the queen did not seem worried. "Do not be afraid," she said. "The ship is responding to me. It is connected to my mind and my emotions. For 400 years it has been still and quiet because I felt nothing. Now," she smiled that small, uncertain smile again, "now it does not know what to do." The vibrations grew stronger. Somewhere in the distance, alarms began to sound. The queen's emotions, awakened after centuries of sleep, were sending shockwaves through the entire ship. "Your Majesty," said carefully, "I think others will notice what is happening." As if in answer, the door to the chamber burst open. Commander stood there with a squad of guards, his silver eyes wide with something that might have been shock or fear. "My queen," he said, staring at her tear-streaked face, "what has happened? What has this human done to you?" The queen turned to face him. She stood tall and straight, the paper crane held close to her heart. "He has given me a gift," she said, and for the first time in 400 years her voice held emotion, wonder, sadness, joy, all mixed together in a way that was messy and human and beautiful. "He has reminded me that I am alive." His face twisted with anger. "This is some kind of attack, a weapon, a poison that affects the mind." He pointed at, "Guards, seize him. He must have used forbidden technology to—" "No," the queen's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. The guards froze. "You will not touch him, you will not harm him." "But my queen, I have given you an order." Her silver eyes blazed with something fierce. "And I give you another one now. Leave this chamber. Tell no one what you have seen. I will address the Empire when I am ready." Stared at her with open horror. His perfect, emotionless queen was standing before him with tears on her face and fire in her eyes. Everything he believed about power and strength was crumbling before him. "This is wrong," he said. "This is weakness. The do not feel, the queen must not feel. It will destroy everything we have built." "Perhaps," the queen said calmly, "or perhaps it will build something better." She looked at with those tear-bright eyes. "Perhaps it is time for us to learn what we have forgotten." Backed away, his face dark with emotions he was not supposed to have. Fear, anger, betrayal. As he left, knew that this was not over. The commander would not accept this change quietly. There would be consequences. But for now, in this moment, something impossible had happened. A paper crane had made a queen cry. And nothing in the universe would ever be the same. Word spread through the eternal throne like fire through dry grass. The queen had cried. The queen had felt emotion. The queen had been changed by a simple gift from a human. No one knew how to react. They had spent millions of years believing that emotions were weakness. That feeling things was a flaw that needed to be removed. Their entire civilization was built on this belief. And now their ruler, the most powerful being in their empire, was standing against everything they had been taught. Was taken back to his quarters by confused guards who did not know what to do with him. He was not a prisoner, but he was not free either. He sat in his room and waited, listening to the sounds of chaos spreading through the ship. Came running in moments later. His face was pale and his hands were shaking. "What did you do? The whole ship is going crazy, are walking around looking lost. Some of them are sitting in corners and staring at nothing. I even saw one of them touch a wall and then look at their hand like they had never felt anything before." The queen's emotions woke something up, said quietly. "She is connected to the ship, and the ship is connected to every here. When she felt things for the first time in centuries, it sent shockwaves through everyone. Ambassador arrived next. She looked exhausted and worried. "What have you done?" "Commander is gathering his forces. He is calling this an attack on the people. He says you used some kind of weapon to poison the Queen's mind." "I gave her a paper crane," said simply. "That is all." Stared at him. "A paper crane." "My grandmother made it. I gave it to the Queen as a gift. No trade, no expectation, just a gift." Looked at her calmly. And she felt something. For the first time in 400 years, she remembered what it was like to be alive. Before could respond, burst through the door. Her silver eyes were wild with fear. "You need to come, now. Commander has declared the Queen compromised. He is leading a coup." They rushed through the hallways of the ship. Everything was different now. The perfect, quiet order of the was broken. Some soldiers stood at their posts, confused and unsure. Others walked aimlessly, touching walls and looking at their hands with wonder. A few sat on the floor with their heads in their hands, overwhelmed by feelings they had never experienced before. The Queen's awakening had cracked open something inside all of them. The emotions that had been buried for millions of years were beginning to leak through. They reached the throne chamber to find a standoff. Commander stood at one end with 100 armed soldiers behind him. Queen stood at the other end, alone except for a handful of guards who had chosen to stay loyal to her. She still held the paper crane in her hand. "Stand down," commanded. His voice echoed through the chamber. "You are no longer fit to rule. Your mind has been corrupted by human poison. The Empire must have a leader who is strong, who is logical, who does not feel." The Queen looked at him with calm eyes. Her face was dry now, but there was something different in her expression, something alive. She said, "How long have you served me?" 312 years, he replied. "I have been loyal, I have been devoted, I have done everything for the Empire." "And in all those years, did you ever question what we had become? Did you ever wonder if there was more to existence than conquest and efficiency?" His face hardened. "Such questions are weakness. Such questions led our ancestors to war and suffering. We removed those weaknesses. We became perfect. We became empty." The Queen stepped forward, unafraid of the weapons pointed at her. "I have lived for 400 years. I have conquered worlds without number. I have commanded armies and crushed civilizations. And until today, I have never felt anything." She held up the paper crane. It looked so small and fragile in the massive throne chamber, so simple compared to the advanced technology surrounding them. This piece of paper was made by an old human woman. Her hands were weak and shaking. It took her hours to fold it. She did it not for money or power or any logical reason. She did it because she loved her grandson, because she wanted him to have something to remember her by. The Queen's voice filled the chamber. "That is what we have lost. That is what we cut away millions of years ago. Not weakness, not inefficiency, but connection, meaning, love." Raised his weapon. "You speak of human diseases. They are weak because they feel. They are weak because they love. We are strong because we feel nothing." "Then why are you so afraid right now?" The question stopped cold. His hand trembled slightly on his weapon. His face, always so controlled, showed something he could not hide. Fear. Real, raw fear. "I am not afraid," he said, but his voice was unsteady. "Yes, you are." The Queen walked closer to him. "You feel it, do you not? The crack that opened when I woke up. It is spreading through all of us. The emotions we buried so long ago are still there. They have always been there, waiting." She stopped right in front of him, close enough to touch. Close enough for him to kill her if he wanted. "You can shoot me," she said softly. "You can take control of the Empire and try to push the feelings back down, but it will not work. Once something wakes up, it does not go back to sleep. Once a heart begins to beat, it does not stop." His weapon was pointed directly at her chest. His finger was on the trigger. Every soldier in the room was watching, waiting. "Why?" he asked, and his voice cracked. "Why would you throw away 400 years of order for this, for feelings, for a piece of paper?" The queen smiled. It was still uncertain, still unpracticed, but it was real. Because order without meaning is just emptiness with rules. Because conquest without connection is just loneliness with power. She reached out and gently lowered his weapon. "Because I would rather feel pain than feel nothing at all." Stared at her. His silver eyes were wet. Tears, real tears, began to fall down his pale blue cheeks. "I do not understand," he whispered. "I do not understand these feelings. They hurt. Why would anyone want this?" "Because the hurt means we are alive," the queen said. "Because with the pain comes something else. Joy, connection, love, things we have not felt in millions of years." She looked around at the soldiers, at the who had gathered to watch. Many of them were crying too. Many of them looked lost and scared. "We have forgotten who we were," she said to them all. "We have forgotten what it means to truly live, but it is not too late. We can remember. We can learn again." She turned back to who had watched everything in silence. "And maybe," she said, "we can have help from those who never forgot." Lowered his head. His weapon fell from his hand and clattered on the floor. Around the room, one by one, the soldiers lowered their weapons too. The coup was over before it really began. Because in the end, even warriors who had conquered galaxies could not fight against the awakening of their own hearts. 3 months passed. 3 months of change, confusion, and wonder. The empire was not the same. It would never be the same again. The awakening that started with Queen spread through the entire civilization like water flowing through cracks in a dam. Emotions that had been suppressed for millions of years were bubbling up everywhere. At first, it was chaos. Who had never felt anything were suddenly overwhelmed by joy and sadness and anger and love. Some did not know how to handle it. There were fights and breakdowns and moments of desperate confusion. The perfect order of the empire was shattered. But slowly, things began to settle. They started to learn what humans had always known, that emotions were not weakness. That feeling things was not a flaw. That connection and love made life worth living. Commander was not punished for his attempted coup. The queen said that punishment would be meaningless when everything was changing so fast. Instead, he was given a new task. He would lead a group of who were struggling the most with their awakened emotions. He would help them learn to feel without losing themselves. It was strange work for a warrior, but discovered that he was good at it. Perhaps because he understood the fear of feeling. Perhaps because he knew what it was like to fight against something you could not control. Became one of the first official ambassadors between thee and humanity. Her years of studying human culture made her perfect for the role. She traveled to Earth and walked among cities filled with noise and color and life. She cried when she heard human music for the first time. She laughed when she tasted chocolate. She sat in a park for hours just watching children play, amazed by their simple joy. When she returned to the empire, she brought back human books and paintings and recordings of music. She set up cultural exchange programs, and humans began to learn from each other. They taught humans about the stars and technology beyond their dreams. The humans taught them about art and love and the beauty of imperfection. The paper crane became a symbol. Queen had it preserved in a special case of clear crystal and placed it beside her throne. Every who came to the throne chamber saw it there. A small, imperfect thing that had changed everything. Some started making their own paper cranes. They were clumsy at first. Their perfect fingers, designed for precision, struggled with the idea of making something that did not need to be perfect. But they kept trying. And when they finished their first cranes, many of them cried, because they understood now what it meant. A gift of time, a gift of effort, a gift of love. Ambassador returned to Earth as a hero. She had done what no one thought possible. She had formed an alliance with the Empire. Not an alliance based on fear or trade or mutual benefit, but something deeper. Something built on shared emotion and growing friendship. went with her, carrying stories of everything he had seen. He told people about the who cried for the first time in millions of years, about the warrior commander who became a counselor, about the young scholar who laughed at chocolate. His stories spread across Earth, changing how humans thought about aliens and about themselves. Stayed behind. The Queen had asked him to remain as the first human cultural ambassador. It was an important job, maybe the most important job in the history of two civilizations, but did not stay because of the title or the importance. He stayed because of what happened the day before the humans were supposed to leave. Queen had called him to her private chamber. When he arrived, he found her sitting at a small table, her brow furrowed in concentration. Before her was a square of paper. "I have been trying to learn," she said without looking up. "It is harder than I expected. My fingers know how to command fleets and sign death warrants. They do not know how to make something beautiful." Sat down across from her. "Would you like help?" She looked at him with those silver eyes that were so different now. They were still ancient, still deep, but they held warmth. They held life. "I would like that," she said. So showed her how to fold. The valley folds and mountain folds. The careful creases that turned flat paper into flying birds. His grandmother had taught him when he was young, and now he passed that knowledge to a being who had ruled the stars for centuries. It took the Queen many tries. Her first cranes were lopsided and strange, but she did not get angry or frustrated. She just kept trying, a small smile on her face that had become more and more natural over the months. Finally, she finished one that looked almost right. She held it up to the light, turning it slowly. "It is not perfect," she said. "No," agreed. "That is what makes it special." The Queen was quiet for a moment. Then she held out the paper crane to him. "This is for you," she said, "a gift without expectation, made with my time and my effort and my feelings." She paused and her voice became soft. "Made with love." Took the crane carefully. It was imperfect. The wings were uneven. One fold was slightly crooked. It was nothing compared to the technology of the. It was nothing compared to the power of an empire that spanned 300 star systems. But it was the most beautiful thing he had ever received. "Thank you," he said, and his voice was thick with emotion. "I will treasure it always." The Queen smiled. A real smile, a warm smile, the smile of someone who had remembered how to be alive. Now 3 months later stood on an observation deck, watching the stars drift past. In one hand he held his grandmother's paper crane. In the other he held the Queen's. 2 small paper birds, 2 symbols of love given freely. Footsteps approached behind him. He turned to see who had come back for a visit. "The transfer ceremony went well," said, leaning against the railing beside him. "The first students arrived on Earth today. They are going to study human art and music. Can you believe it? Learning to paint, learning to sing." "Things have changed," said quietly. "You changed them," shook his head in amazement. "You changed an entire empire with a paper crane. They are going to write about this in history books forever. The human who made a queen cry." Looked at the 2 paper cranes in his hands. He thought about his grandmother, who had never seen the stars but whose love had reached them anyway. He thought about Queen, who had conquered galaxies but never felt alive until she received a simple gift. "I did not change anything," he said. "My grandmother did. She taught me what love means, what it means to give without expecting anything back, what it means to spend your time and your effort just to make someone else happy." He held up her crane, the one she made with her shaking hands so many years ago. She never knew that her love would travel across the stars. She never knew that a queen would cry because of a piece of paper she folded. She was just an old woman who wanted her grandson to feel loved. Was quiet for a moment, then he put his hand on shoulder. "She would be proud of you." "I hope so." Looked out at the stars, endless and beautiful and full of possibility. "I really hope so." Far away in her throne room on the eternal throne, Queen sat with a square of paper in her hands. She folded carefully, slowly, remembering the lessons had taught her. When she finished, she held up her crane and smiled. Around her, the chamber was no longer cold and perfect. There were paintings on the walls now, gifts from human artists. There was music playing softly, a melody from a distant blue planet. And beside her throne, in its case of crystal, sat a small paper crane that had changed everything. The queen placed her creation next to it. Then she began folding another. Outside her window, the stars burned bright. Two civilizations were learning from each other. A universe that had seemed cold and empty was filling with warmth and color and life. And it all started with a simple gift, given without expectation. A paper crane made with love.